Okay, now, so when we speak of the relative domain, obviously you're making a distinction between what's relative and what's absolute. And most people don't make that distinction. Because everything that is known is relative. Everything that exists is relative. Okay? So there's no real reason to make that distinction because everybody experiences everything as relative. It's always in relationship. It's something and nothing. It's this or that. So when we talk about the absolute, we're not talking about another relative domain. See? And that's one of the places people fall down on this matter. So you think, oh, the absolute, that's the absolute stuff. That's not the relative stuff. You see, the absolute stuff, it's a different place. And when we do that, we've just made it relative. You see, it's a different place than this, see, that we experience as relative. So really what we're talking about when we talk about absolute is this, but what is true absolutely about this, not relatively, not relatively about this, all right? So now, when in the work that we do here, say in, Cheng-Shin, what's called Cheng-Shin, we work on both absolute and relative. In some domains of work, in light mode like Zen, they only work on the absolute, okay? What is absolutely true. And some domains like cognitive science or something like that, they only work on the relative, more psychology or philosophy, whatever it is. It's always relative stuff, or science. But here we work everything. See, so we're working in relative, like what is communication? Communication is a relative aspect of existence, as is thinking, as is emotion, language, skill, effective interaction, a table, a chair. These are all, relative. And so we ask, what is that? What is, what makes a chair a chair? Why is it a chair? What is communication? How does it come to pass? How did it come to exist? What is it actually we're doing when we're communicating? Or what is it we're doing when we think we're communicating but not communicating? Say, what is language? How does it exist? Well, how did it come to pass? Basically, what we're working on, what we work on a lot when we work on what we call the relative domain, is to not overlook the obvious. And most of the most powerful questions that I ask are asked about the overlooked obvious. In other words, what seems just obvious, and so you take it for granted, and there's no questioning, there's no real investigation. See? But in this work, we don't do that. See? We look right into the obvious and set out to grasp what it is, even in relative terms. And then we also look into what exists and try to grasp what's absolutely true. See? So we don't, we question both in the relative and the absolute.